Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. I, of course, am Lewis Porter Jr. And, really thank you for coming by because you could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here. So let's talk about our topic today, since this is another, I guess I get those complicated ones. So I decided to go with something even more complicated. So this one we're talking about the lack of people of color in positions of power in the comic and RPG industry. So some caveats before I even get started on this. So I want people to understand why I'm talking about this specifically. Number one, I will not be including gay, trans, anything beyond people of color. The reason being, I am not trans, I am not gay, I am an African-American male who produces role-playing games and does comic book stuff and has made comic books. So I want to talk about my expertise. I am not, I think, equipped enough to speak on those other areas. Don't get me wrong. Live your best life. That's what I believe. But I don't ever want to push my opinions on there. There are people who are much better spoken, much better, what's the word I'm looking for? Much better champions of that. I'm championing this. I'm championing people of color. And I'm going to talk specifically black men, because I'm talking about me, but that's why. So don't get confused. I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I'm just telling you what I'm talking about in my area of expertise. With that being said, let me just tell you the number of black, I'll say black because that'll be my word for people of color, but I'm going to say black publishers that I know. Off the top of my head, I can think of, no problem, including myself, is 4. 4. Myself, Mike Stackpole, Eloy, and Rich. Yeah, Rich Lescafleur. Yeah, that's it. That's all I can think of right off the top of my head. Boom. Now, there might be more. I just can't think of any right now. But those are the ones I'm thinking about. And I'm not talking about freelancers. I don't want to talk about freelancers, even though some of those people are freelancers. I don't want to talk about freelancers. I want to talk about people who specifically have their own company, put out products, sell it to people directly or stores. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm interested in discussing. That's what I'm interested in getting more information on. A lot of people get caught up in the whole idea, well, so-and-so makes games. No. I mean the publishers, the guys who pay out the artists, the writers, the editors, the layout people. I'm talking about those people. Those numbers are quite small. And I think it's a combination of interest in gaming in general, which has gotten better over time. Don't get me wrong. It's gotten much better over time. But still, those numbers are small. I mean, I always ask myself, when was the last time I've ever seen an entire table of people of color playing a role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons? Now, some of you are like, oh, I know some, but let's keep it real. That is an oddity rather than a normal occurrence. I've never been to a table where I saw 6 black males playing Dungeons & Dragons. And I'm nearly 51. And I've been gaming, oh God, when I say this, I've been gaming since, the early 80s. And I have not seen that. Have I seen tables of white young men playing? Of course. Have I been part of those tables? Of course. Have I seen them with white women playing? Of course. I've heard rumors of full tables of white women playing. I've never seen it with my own eyes. That doesn't mean they don't happen, but I have a feeling that was from people I trust. I believe that happens. Have I seen a table of black women playing D&D? No. Have I seen a table of mixed people of color playing D&D? Yes. But have I seen an all Asian table? No. Maybe I'm not, because I'm not Asian, but maybe I'm not going to places that you'd find lots of Asian gamers. I grew up all over the U.S. I mean, Connecticut, Maryland, Virginia, Dallas, Indianapolis, now South Florida. I've been a lot of places and I've seen a lot of people, but I've never seen, specifically black men. Six black men running. Not seen that. And I think that affects how games are developed. People have been very much on, getting more diverse games, getting more stuff. But it's not just diversity on just the writing staff. That's important. Don't get me wrong. That is important. But also the diversity of the people who are paying the money out to people to make these things. For example, Nate, God, I can't think of Nate's last name now. Nate is actually, he works with Kevin Feige on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's well known. Nate Moore. That's it. Nate Moore is a blackface on a team, the world's most popular movie franchise. And he pushed very hard to get the Black Panther on the screen. Now, I'm sure like most of them, they all wanted to see it, but getting the Black Panther on screen with a black director, I believe black writers primarily, an all-black cast, you know, in front of the screen and behind the camera, that's not easy to do. And, you know, that's a long shot. And I think that's why so many people, I mean, especially people of color, black people specifically, saw Black Panther as this watershed moment. You know, I described it to some of my white friends as this is what Star Wars was for them. There's going to be a whole generation of people who are going to see Black Panther as the linchpin to black fiction and black fantasy. And that's great. That's great. That's what you want. You want to get more people involved. You get different voices. You get better voices. You get, when I use the word better, I don't mean like better. I mean better. Just more diversity, more creativity, more interesting stuff. I believe, as I always believed, the definition of creativity is putting two things together that fundamentally do not sound like they would work together. The easiest way to describe that, chocolate, peanut butter. Chocolate and peanut butter. I don't know if they'd sound good together, and then someone did, and it found it was amazing. And Reese's Peanut Butter Cups have made billions of dollars off that forever. You know, you find things that you don't think would work that work. And that's really the creativity part that I'm talking about. I want more people to get involved with how can we get voices that don't look like me to tell different stories, or in different ways that I may or may not know. That's another aspect to it. You know, it's funny. I don't describe comics and gaming of having discrimination, but I know they exist. I know I'm not a fool. I know they exist. But with such creative people, usually we don't think about that because that isn't our focus. That isn't what we're going for. That isn't what we want to do. We want to make the most creative thing possible. We want to make it beautiful. We want to make it interesting, and we want to get people involved in it who also will love it. It's more about what you like. But also the other part that happens is that you've got to get more exposure for people who may or may not see something like this. You know, role-playing games are expensive, and sometimes they can be complex, and the ideas have to be something that kids can easily identify with. Like I said for myself, Star Wars was the movie that started my whole love of science fiction. You know, that was the moment. I tell people the same story. It was back in 1977. I went into the movie center to see Star Wars. And literally, 2 hours later, I came back. I was a totally different child. Fell in love with science fiction. Started to soak it all up. And that became my thing. That was my interest point. Now, a lot of people got that same interest point. But all of them didn't look like me. I mean, you know, the first Star Wars film, a little bit lacking of color. Empire was a smarter move. You picked the right black guy to play, you know, Billy D. Williams being Billy D. Williams. And, you know, they've gone on from there and built their world off that. I think that's a brilliant and smart idea. But, you know, as for a face looks like mine that's brown, I mean, my son, prime example. I want heroes that he can easily identify with and like because of that. I mean, look, I know there are people in this industry who want to do great things. They may not have the opportunity to do so because where they currently are in their position. But that doesn't mean over time this can't change. When I got started doing my own little business, Lewis Porter Jr. Design, was back in 2000, and there weren't too many black guys doing publishing of role-playing games. 20 years later, yeah, there's a lot more people of color. There's a lot more people of color, black, Asian, Hispanic. I think that's great. I think diversity is the best thing you can do. You add more cool stuff. If it's cool, let's put it in there. That's how I see it. But at the same time, I know the real changes that have to happen at a top level. They have to be the people with the money. And to do that, you actually have to have the money to influence people or have a voice like this to influence people's thought and mindset. Now, that being said, do I think more can be done? Of course. More can always be done. Do I think enough is being done? No. But at least they're trying. I always go back to the thing I love in comics and the thing I hate in comics. I love that comics want to add people of color to their comics. I hate when they want to add them as legacy heroes. Great example. Green Lantern. Alan Scott, Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart. I get it. It is just a ring. And Green Lantern is Green Lantern. And some people see Hal Jordan as Green Lantern, and some people see Jon Stewart as. Just depending where you got the comic books, depending whether you watch them, that's how you see it. I remember when the first Green Lantern movie was coming out, I know a lot of my black friends were highly upset saying, I can't believe they changed the Green Lantern from black to white. And I started laughing. I'm like, what? But they didn't know. They saw it from the cartoon, and that's all they knew. So there's moments like that. You're like, okay, I can understand that could be a problem. Or I'll tell you my one that it hurts me to say this like this, and I'm going to sound really, but when they made Miles Morales, I was like, what's the point of, they already have a Spider-Man. Why do they need to make another Spider-Man? And it's not that I didn't like Miles, I just didn't care for him because it's not of my era. I grew up with Peter Parker. That's who my Spider-Man is. And then I saw Into the Spider-Verse, which changed my whole perception of what Miles was. Because I'm an old guy, you forget sometimes there are new people in this thing who want to see something they can recognize. And Spider-Man's a kind of an easy story you can all understand. The underdog gets powers and abilities, missed an opportunity to really help someone, save someone's life, and it cost them. And he's spending his entire life reliving that moment and just trying to do the right thing. That's an easy story. Everyone can get behind it. Everybody can understand it. I am 100% behind it. And Miles' story is not that story. Miles' story is different. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have credence in the Spider-Man universe. And I like that Miles has developed his own character out of it. Yes, he is not my Peter Parker Spider-Man. But that's not a bad thing. That's actually quite a good thing. And I like that. I like that in that sense they took a character with a legacy, that they made something different. But I would prefer if people would make something out of whole cloth different. Don't get me wrong. I understand why they do that. It's easier to get people interested in a character they already are familiar with than getting a whole new one to start. But if the character's cool, the character's cool. We can do cool characters. You just gotta go, I'm gonna do a cool character. I'm gonna create the character. Here's the cool character I'm gonna create. And here's the kicker. And I learned this from Chuck Dixon, who was nice enough to give me this great piece of advice. He said, when you're making your characters, don't give them a sex, race, or anything until the end. And then when you do, totally randomly pick what they're going to be. Don't think about it, just randomly pick, and then just match them up as accordingly. Because a love story you thought between two people may be two men. Might be a white man and a black man. Or maybe a black woman and a white woman. Don't let your own personal perception and concepts shove you in a box of what you have to think creatively has to be. Leave that stuff to the end. Leave that stuff to the end and then go, okay, I'm just going to put a piece of paper, like race, color, set, just put in a thing and just pull them out and just assign them at random. And that's what you do. Now your story takes on a wholly different feeling. I know for myself, when I'm creating characters, oddly enough, I usually start with a lot of women. I don't even know why I do it, I just do. I've done it for, the last fantasy game I did, Neo Exodus, we built 5 different specific nations. And out of the 5 major nations, 4 of them are run by women. And the last one's run by a black male, African American, dark skin tone brother, you figure it out. And I went with that. I was like, nope, that's what we're going to do, and just go with it. I think that gave it a very different feel. A lot of people didn't even notice, which I thought was hilarious. People are like, we want more diversity. I'm like, it's pretty diverse over here. I don't see that stuff. And it's like, okay, I get it. So when people say they want diversity, you want to see it in actually what they do. The execution is important. So when people talk about me saying, oh, I want to see more people of color, I'm like, okay, great. Your characters should be more of them. The iconics that represent the world that you're building, there should be more of them. People are like, well, I never thought about that. Well, if you're thinking about diversity, how'd you miss that? Diversity isn't one person. Diversity isn't one character. Diversity is really looking at the world and going, hey, how many people there look like me? Anytime I'm creating something, I instinctively think most people are going to be black. But in reality, that's not going to be black. They're going to have their own trials and tribulations, not based on the color like I might see them. My most recent thing I did for our Amazing Universe, which is our superhero line, I made 2 twin brothers. 2 twin brothers, one mother's white, the father's black. The twins, one appears white, one appears black. Now, the question always becomes, if your mother's white and you're black, are you black? Now people are like, well, yeah. I mean, your father's black, you're black. Whatever, 1 ounce drop of blood, the 1 drop of blood makes you black. But if you appear white, what kind of stigmas and beliefs does that happen to you? What kind of situations does that cause? What kind of feelings does that change from? You might see things, people might not realize you are black. The official term that I've heard as a kid was, we all call it passing. You pass for white. I knew there's some people in my family, very, very light skinned, who could pass for white, if not easily Hispanic. So, it all depends. How you look at it, how you see it, what do you perceive it as. So, and that affects the character that you're creating. So I want people to think that way. And that really goes back to the top. The top people have to think differently from what they've been doing since day one. Let's just keep it real. Change what you've been doing since day one. Push it in a different direction. Do something awesome. Be incredible. But if you're really serious about changing this industry, or the comics and RPG, you need people of color in those power positions. And if you go to a place, like I'll say Gen Con during the Emmy Awards, and all you see are faces that look just like yours, and you don't see a lot of diversity on either side, male, female, black, white, you got to do something about that. You have to, especially if you've got the power to do so and then you choose not to. Now, I know there's several companies that have that thought process. They're for diversity, but I'll tell it bluntly. The diversity you have at the top is pretty pale. And we're talking about, the top 10% of companies out there making money. Their boardroom, I'm easily going to guess, is not 10% black. They're just not 10% black. Sorry. People want to feel that they would be or are, but it's not. What can I say? Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later. Hey, thank you for checking out my channel. Do me a favor, check out my other videos, and if you like what you see, subscribe.